So, hi, I'm Lucy, and I'm doing a Lord of the Flies quote analysis. So, a brief intro about Lord of the Flies. It was written by William Golding, and it's about a group of boys getting marooned on an island without adult supervision. So they're all like free, and they're like, "Yay, freedom!" But then it ends to be very disastrous. So the quote I'm analyzing today is from chapter 5 of page 102. My version of the book may be different from yours. This is my version. So you might not necessarily find this quote on page 102. So here's the quote. He lost himself in a maze of thoughts that were rendered vague by his lack of words to express them. Frowning, he tried again. This meeting must not be fun, but business. At that, he walked fast, aware all at once of urgency and the declining sun, and a little wind created by his speed that breathed about his face. The wind pressed his gray shirt against his chest so that he noticed, in this new mood of comprehension, how the folds were stiff like cardboard and unpleasant. Noticed too how the frayed edges of his shirt were making uncomfortable pink area on the front of his thighs. With a convulsion of the mind, Rolf discovered dirt and decay, understood how much he disliked perpetually flicking the tangled hair out of his eyes, and at last, when the sun was gone, rolling noisily to rest among dry leaves. At that, he began to trot. The beach near the bathing pool was dotted with groups of boys waiting for the assembly. They made way for him silently, conscious of his grim mood and the fault of the fire. My first impression when I read this quote was that Rolf was losing control, yet at the same time he was becoming order. I'm going to describe this more later on. And that this is giving off a very foreboding tone, and it's very, very serious due to the formal language used. And overall, it just gives off a negative feel. So first, definitions of words that I didn't really understand. The first word is rendered, that was used in this sentence. Maze of thoughts that were rendered vague by his lack of words. Rendered in this sentence means made, so it's saying that his thoughts were made vague by his lack of words. Moving on to the word convulsion, which means seizure, with a convulsion of mind, which translates to with a seizure of mind. Lastly, perpetually. The word is used in the sentence, understood how much he disliked perpetually flicking the tangled hair. Perpetually means continually, so it means that he, as in Rolf, disliked having to continually flick the tangled hair. So moving on to words that stood out. In this sentence, this meeting must not be fun but business. The word business stood out because it's very formal, and it sort of shows that Rolf is becoming organized. And then the next one, how the folds were stiff like cardboard and unpleasant, conscious of his grim mood. The three words in these two quotes, stiff, unpleasant, grim, are negative words that defines the tone of the quote, and shows that it's not a happy event where everybody's like, yay, nothing happened, we're all free, but rather where no one dares to speak out. Moving on, other words, meeting versus assembly. So in the quote, William Golding at first uses the word meeting, but then changes to the word assembly, which made me wonder why. I searched up the meaning of both of them. It turns out that both of them have the same meaning, except that meeting is more casual rather than assembly, where it is more formal. So it ties back to the idea of Rolf becoming more like order. So at that, he began to trot. The word trot is more often used for animals, for example horses. So although Rolf is becoming more like symbolizing order, at the same time there's still part of him that he's still a wild person. Moving on to imagery. So there were a lot of imagery in the quote, but the three main ones that stood out were gray shirt, tangled hair, and grim mood. So gray shirt, the shirt actually caught my eye because a lot of the boys actually took off their shirt because they're like wild. I searched up what gray symbolizes, and it actually turns out that gray symbolizes many things, but two things that it symbolizes that could symbolize Rolf is sophistication and maturity. So the fact that a lot of the boys took off their shirt, which were rage. So it shows that they're becoming wild and they're discarding this maturity, this civilization in them, while Ralph keeping it on shows that there's still part of him that's still civilized. While on the other hand, the fact that Ralph has tangled hair contradicts the glacier part where he's still civilized, because tangled hair gives off a wild scent and it shows that how long they haven't showered. These two imagery are contradicting. So moving on to grim mood. So the word grim identifies the tone of the event, like I said before. So phrases and paragraphs. He lost himself in the maze of thoughts that were rendered vague by his lack of words to express them. Frowning, he tried again. So he, in the sentence, is Rolf, obviously, and it shows that he's been away from civilization so long that he's slowly becoming affected by chaos and he's forgetting things. The forgetting things starts also happening as the story goes on, where Rolf starts to even forget the purpose of the fire. When in the beginning he was like, oh, the fire is really important, we need it. But now he's like, wait, why do we need the fire? So it shows that Rolf has been away from civilization and is affected by chaos. Okay, lastly, symbolism. With a convulsion of the mind, Rolf discovered dirt and decay, understood how much he disliked perpetually flicking tangled hair out of his eyes, and at last, when the sun was gone, rolling noisily to rest among dry leaves. So there's alliteration in this where it says discovered, dirt, and decay. And also disliked, actually. So I think William Golding uses this alliteration, emphasize the word dirt and decay especially, because dirt and decay symbolizes the thin layer of savagery on each of the boys in this case. Because to consider the fact that Rolf and the other boys are British, and British boys are generally tied back to the idea of where they're supposed to be polite and have a lot of manners, and not rather than being wild and having dirt on them. So having dirt on them would probably consider them as a savage. So the fact that they have dirt on them right now are quite savagery acts. So Rolf not liking the filth symbolizes not only his hatred for savagery, but also that he still wants to become civilization. He still wants to be part of civilization. So, brief review of what I just said about the quote. He lost himself in the maze of thoughts that were rendered, which means vague by his lack of words to express them. Frowning, he tried again. This paragraph shows that he as a Rolf starts to forget things. This meeting must not be fun, but business. The word business gives off a formal sense. As that he walked fast, aware all at once of urgency and the declining sun and a little wind created by his speed that breathed about his face. The wind presses gray, which symbolizes maturity, shirt against his chest so that he noticed in this new mood of comprehension how the folds were stiff like cardboard and unpleasant. Tone. Notice too how the frayed edges of his shirt were making him uncomfortable. Again, this symbolizes tone. This is relating to tone. Pink area on the front of his thighs. With a convulsion, which means seizure, of the mind, Rolf discovered dirt and decay, which symbolizes savagery. Understood how much he disliked perpetually. Perpetually means continually. Flicking the tangled is tied with wild hair out of his eyes, and at last when the sun was gone, rolling noisily to rest among dry leaves. At that he began to trot. Trot is an animal description. The beach near the bathing pool was dotted with groups of boys waiting for the assembly. Assembly is a formal word. They made way for him silently, conscious of his grim, again adding on to tone, mood, and the thought at the fire. So hopefully after watching this video, you can better understand this quote. And that's the end. Bye bye.